All righty, we are coming live. Seeing some people come in. Happy Thursday, everybody. 1 week out from Thanksgiving. Hope everyone's ready to eat some turkey. I will give it about 30 seconds to let people log in, go through some housekeeping items, and then hand it over to the one and only Tom. In the meantime, the chat should be open to everybody. So if you guys, oh, we've got some Fireflies recorders in here. In the meantime, if you guys want to say where you're dialing in from, Jean, you know the drill. Hi, Jean Toll. Thank you for tuning in from Denver. Love it, love it. So if you guys don't mind putting in the chat, just because you all as participants can't see who's here because everything happens behind the scenes. But if you put your name in chat, everyone can see who's there. Hey, Michelle from Grand Junction. Ooh, we've got some New York folks coming in. Awesome. Well, as people keep joining, really quick, I'll go through some housekeeping items and then just setting the stage for Tom, and we'll get going because we've got some good stuff to cover. Per usual, we've got the chat open right now. Love to hear where you're from. Ongoing, it's a great place for leaving comments, adding your own 2 cents. If there's something that you want to add to Tom's as commentary, that's great. I will say if you have a specific question that you want answered, it's helpful to use the actual Q&A tool so that we can address those and check them off the list. Tom does love questions. So the more you guys can ask and the more you interact, the better. So don't be shy. We would love to answer your questions. If it's possible to answer them on the fly during Tom while he's on one of the slides, we'll go ahead and do that. If not, we will wait to the end and make sure that we address them. I'm sure I'm forgetting some other housekeeping things, but I did want to tell you guys, we've got a lot of y'all that were with us at the webinar last week. So welcome back. Happy to see you here again. And we do have some new names in the background. So thank you for joining us this week. That being said, the first few slides are going to cover some of what Tom covered in last week's 2026 Outlook webinar. It's just going to help set the stage for context. And for any of you guys that were here last week and maybe missed the first few minutes or tuned out or got distracted or had to leave early, it'll help refresh your brain on how that goes. So, with all of that being said, thank you everyone who said hello and posted your names in the chat. I will hand it over to Tom and he can take over from here.
Thank you, Daniela. That's awesome, and thanks everybody for giving us an hour of your time on I'm sure, a busy Thursday. So as Daniela said, what I wanted to do in today's webinar is start with a little recap of what we had spoken of last week in a webinar about some forecasts for 2026. So I just want to talk about forecasted costs, the landscape of that, and regulatory outlook, as well as just give you a little bit of history on the electrical grid and some of the things that will be affecting all of us in the future. And the reason I think that's important is I think you'll see it kind of motivates you, or it accentuates this idea of why energy management really is so important. So as we move through the webinar today, we're going to talk about this idea of a energy pyramid, a philosophical approach to how I think is best to look at your energy management strategies over the course of time. And probably the last 20, 25 minutes of the webinar today is going to focus on the building blocks of good energy management. So again, this is an Energy Management 101, so it's a lot of conceptual stuff. And you'll see by the end too, we have another webinar that's coming up to try to build on this. And so as we get near the end, we'll tell you a little bit more about that and what I hope to cover. For those of you that are new to us and new to me, I go by Tom, even though you might see my full name Thomas. But I've been around the energy industry for 20 years. I started my career as a physics teacher, so that might scare some of you on the call, but that's one of the reasons why I really like the questions, because I'm used to it as a teacher. But been working in the energy industry for 20 years and work with more than 250 organizations around the country in many of the different industry types. So I have a diverse background. But the theme with my background is I have always worked with people with the culture in mind and energy conservation. So I'm a strong advocate for really taking a look internally at how you operate your business and how energy conservation and energy efficiency strategies can be implemented in order to become as efficient as possible. Again, if you're new to us, I work for EnergyCAP. And if you're unfamiliar with what we do, EnergyCAP is a utility bill management company. We help our clients manage their utility bills through a platform that we call utility management. And we have some modules within the platform called Carbon Hub and Smart Analytics. The theme here is these are powerful tools to help our clients analyze their data and really understand their performance so that they can work towards becoming more efficient. We also help some of our clients capture their data and get it into our software because we feel so passionately that having good data in one spot can really drive a lot of good behaviors. So with that in mind, what I wanted to do is, and I do this frequently with the webinars, just want to hear from you. And just so you know, there's a handful of polls throughout today's webinar. But what is your number one energy management concern heading into 2026? So I'm guessing as we wind down our year and we're starting to think about the new year, we're starting to do planning and just thinking down the road. What can we do to get better at our jobs and help our organizations? So is
Uh,
your concern about not having enough human resources to do what needs to get done? Are you really concerned about increasing energy prices coming down the pipe? Do you have a lot of building control issues in your mind where you know it's a matter of getting good vendors and maybe looking at your building automation system to get more control in your buildings? Are you in the middle of a lot of projects where you're really trying to finish some energy efficiency projects? Or are all of these things on your mind? You're deep in your organization, you've been there for years, you're juggling a lot of balls and all of these things in your mind.
and Tom, we actually had Aaron chime in that employee buy-in is a big one.
Oh
So
yeah.
definitely, I know it's something that you talk about with policies, and you've got a saying, and of course, I'm blanking on it. What is it? It's like not slow and steady, but what do you have as advice for that?
I think what you're referring to is this idea of you gotta, in order to speed up, you need to slow down. That you really need to go backwards and really build relationships, and that's going to be a theme of what we talk about today. Is energy management is important, absolutely, but to really achieve it at its highest level, it starts with really good relationships, and you'll see that as a common thread and a common theme throughout today's discussion.
Yeah.
So the poll, Daniela, can people see the results of the poll, or do I just see the results
Yes,
on my screen?
we can. I think I hit share, so hopefully folks can see. But I know usually you talk through them, so give us the lowdown there.
Yeah, yeah. So ultimately, what it seems is like all these things are on most people's mind, and the second place one of the one that's also real high priority is just increasing energy prices. So, how I translate that or interpret that is that means that you guys are just good at what you do. You have a lot of things on your plate, and you're trying to affect your organization in a positive way in many areas, and so that's awesome. So, with that in mind, let me close this up. I think Daniela correct, and move on to the next slide.
Perfect.
And yeah, and as we said, let's start talking energy prices. So what you're looking at here is a map of the United States. And certainly this is crude in the sense it's not specific by state or by area, but just give you a flavor for what's going to be driving price increases in the future. And so without speaking to all the stuff on this, but just giving you a flavor of this is moving around the map and starting in the Northwest is there are going to be some things that influence pricing in the West. One of them is if you have a bad year of snow in the mountains, and so there's less water behind the dams, you could have hydro issues or electricity that's created through that mechanism drive price increases. There's also a data boom, a data center boom in Oregon and Washington that could drive prices. So in the Northwest, and it's true really all around the country, a couple key things are this idea of just the weather and data centers can dramatically affect prices. And if you were to ask me, based on the research that we've done, what type of price increases should you expect if you're in the Northwest? It could be anywhere between 12 and 18% in 2026. So it's going to be profound. In the Midwest, different challenges. One of them is aging infrastructure. One of the themes you'll see as I talk about our grid a little bit is if you don't know this, there is a lot of renewable energy that's being generated in the middle of our country. The challenge is getting that energy to the outskirts or around the perimeter of our country because that's where most people live. Most people live along the coast. So how are we going to get that energy out there? Well, it's old infrastructure and it's what we call grid congestion. There's some challenges with getting the energy to where it needs to be. And that is going to drive prices up in the middle of the country. Our best guess is it's going to be 15% in that general vicinity. In the Northeast, here you've got high demand driving up prices. Another event that's happening in the Northeast, if you don't know this, is that historically a number of the states in the Northeast would burn fuel oil in order to create heat. Well, fuel oil is very dirty. And so they've tried to plumb in, or they try to get piping and get natural gas flowing into the Northeast. And so there's a lot of infrastructure work that's being done there and a lot of costs that are going to occur as a result of that. In the South, challenges here, weather, climate is affecting all of us, but in the South, it's average temperatures are higher than they've ever been, so demand is higher, and that's going to be a factor. Again, we'd guess maybe they're going to be about 15% price increases. Texas, although it's a state with a lot of renewable energy, they still have demand issues. So it might be best in Texas in terms of price increases, but it's still going to be significant. And then finally, finishing the tour around the country. If you talk in the West, California, with all of its regulations and all of its proactive approach to energy, there's still challenges with climate change and wildfires and recovering from some of these events, which decimated the systems where these companies need to rebuild the infrastructure in order to get energy to where it needs to be. And so again, it's going to be driving price increases. And so to summarize, expect significant price increases around the country for the reasons that I've highlighted, but there's a lot of stuff going on. But it means that you got to really control your energy. And that's the theme of this whole webinar. Next thing I wanted to take a look at here is I want to take a look at the building benchmarking landscape. And again, I don't want to get deep in the weeds here. I just want to give you a flavor of this. Again, a map of the country and the different color coordinated to show what's going on. The theme here is that several states are being very proactive. Many of us recognize our federal government has backed off a little bit on its commitments and on its enthusiasm for energy conservation and energy efficiency. And as a result, some states and some cities are proactively implementing more standards and setting a higher bar. And this just gives you a feeling for it's happening all around the country in different ways. Some states are leading the charge, but it's a good thing. It's a good thing that some municipalities and states are stepping up and driving change. In terms of the grid, just some thoughts on the utility grid, if you're unfamiliar with these ideas, is the utility grid, 70% of the infrastructure is more than 25 years old. I just want to repeat that and let you think about that. 70% of the utility grid is more than 25 years old. So it's decades old. Certainly all mechanical stuff has a lifetime associated with it. And so eventually those things need to be replaced, repaired. And there are challenges and a lot of deferred investment that's happened in this industry and really throughout all industries, right? I mean, that's a theme of what we all see in our jobs. So we've got aging infrastructure. I mentioned a minute ago this idea of getting the energy from the middle of the country to the perimeter. That's this idea of transmission and interconnection bottlenecks, because regulators are making this hard. There's long lead times for getting the equipment manufactured and then installed, and regulatory challenges. And all of this is going to create burdens. And again, I think contribute to keeping higher prices. The theme of the slide a couple slides ago. Another thing that you might not know about the grid is when the grid was designed decades ago, the thought was you would have energy and electricity created in a few areas and it would travel one directionally out to where it was needed. But now the grid is completely different because now you've got renewable energy that,
oh.
Whoops, you okay?
We got you back, but the thought is that energy was created.
Uh-oh. So energy was created in one spot. And so if you go back many decades, it was created by the burning of coal. So you'd have these coal-fired plants that would be making electricity, and the energy would be moving one directionally to where it was needed. But now with wind and solar, and the fact that you don't necessarily have wind 24 hours a day, and you certainly don't have sun 24 hours a day, the loads are variable. And now the energy has to travel both ways. It could be going to the source and it could be coming from the source. It's just more complicated than it's ever been. You layer in that you've got extreme weather, you've got threats to the grid because of security. You've also got the pressure of electrification growing in our country. There's all of these things that are happening with the grid. And the theme again here is that a lot of investment needs to be made, and it's forecasted that we need to spend somewhere between $300 and $700 billion to keep the grid functioning at a high level. And the question is, are we going to do that? Are we going to make the commitment to do that? And who's going to do that? But taking it back to our world is, to some extent, it doesn't matter, because the better job we do with energy management, it makes it a little bit easier on the grid, and it guarantees that we can be more resilient if we put strategies in place for our individual businesses to do well. A few more nuggets about the grid. we're entering an interesting point here in 2026 is that the grid, for the first time it appears, is that renewables are going to replace coal as the world's largest electricity source. So we're at the tipping point where historically it's always been coal. And if you go back a few decades, gas became very prominent, the burning of gas to create the electricity in the US grid, just with all the fracking and all the availability of natural gas. So we're transitioning. The last bullet here where it says US renewables share electricity generation, or the share of generation back in 2024 was 23% of the grid. And in 2026, it's expected to become 27%. So we're nibbling away. More and more renewable energy is being put on the grid. Year by year, that percentage is growing. Some facts just anecdotally is the total use of electricity worldwide is supposed to grow by about 3.7%. In the US, it's about 2%. And that equates to 4.25 trillion kWh of power usage in the US. Just a number that's so huge, it's unfathomable, right? Just a huge amount of energy. And the growth we're going to see, this 2% growth that's anticipated in 2026, 85% of that growth is going to happen as a result of emerging economies and industries, things like battery and semiconductor production. So those industries are going to be consuming more energy along with EV charging and all of the effort that a lot of businesses are going into electrify their buildings. All of that commitment is going to translate into more use. And so that's where a lot of the growth in the grid is going to come from. So finally, some thoughts about the grid and also transitioning us back into energy management is the investments in the grid really are going to be critical. So storage in the grid, so having batteries or hydro pumping and thermal storage, we need to find different ways to store energy to handle the ups and downs and the ebb and flow, the demand of the grid. Demand response, again, needs to be a big part of how we function and plan into our daily lives so that we can respond to the different demand in our buildings at a local level. But if you could imagine, the same thing is happening on a global level in the US. So it's using smart meters and IoT technology, digitalization, using AI technology, and just a smart grid, having the grid adjust to all of this change in demands. We need to, as I've said, have more infrastructure to improve stability and efficiency in the grid. And finally, we have to have more energy distributed systems and things such as vehicle to grid systems. If you're unfamiliar with that, it's becoming more a part of our lexicon. This idea, if you have a EV car and you charge it, there's no reason you can't discharge it if you need the energy for something else. So this idea that you can have systems or different strategies of storing energy and utilizing the energy in different ways. So to summarize, a lot of stuff is expected to happen in 2026. A lot of it is going to drive costs higher. And really what that means is we just need to do a better job with our energy management to protect ourselves. So what is energy management? At a local level, how does it function? This definition I love, and I just want to read it to you because I just think it so encompasses what energy management is. But energy management is the proactive and systematic monitoring, control, and optimization of energy consumption to conserve use, reduce costs, and minimize environmental impact. I think that definition is great because it just really summarizes what is at the heart of what I think a lot of us are probably doing day by day, is we're just trying to find ways to scratch and claw and save our organization's energy and money. Where I think it needs to start is it needs to start with monitoring your bills, and you'll see that in the next couple slides as I talk about the strategies. You've got to implement strategies. After knowing what's going on in your buildings, you got to translate that into strategies of change in your buildings in order to capture savings. And it also involves optimizing usage patterns in your building. So I many times will use this phrase because I think it helps people really to understand where there's great opportunity. It's you need to know who is where and when within your facilities. Again, I want to repeat that because I think it's important. You, as an energy manager or as somebody trying to be more efficient in your buildings, you need to know who is where and when, because that drives a lot of your decisions for how you're going to manage your buildings. So why is energy management important? Well, for most of us on the call, it's about saving money, right? What you might not realize is that energy is typically the second most expensive line item in your budget. So after personnel costs, which are usually a massive part of an organization's budget, energy is number two. So if you're going to take a bite out of it and you're going to look for ways to save, energy is a good spot to go. Another thing, if you haven't thought of this, is that energy prices are volatile. And you don't know from year to year they're going to go up or down. Again, expectations are for them to always go up. But the best you can do as a building owner is to protect yourself by managing your energy. And that's just simply the best you can do. In addition, energy management is good for the environment. And something else that falls out of good energy management is it improves occupant comfort and ultimately it increases productivity. And I want to talk about this a little bit more. You might say, well, Tom, how does that happen? Like, what's the consequence here? Well, when you start to focus more on your buildings, when you really start to keep an eye on what's happening, who's in them, and when they're there, you start to look at set points, you start to look at building automation systems and control. Ultimately, there's this process of improvement, and the consequence of that is the buildings just get more comfortable and end up having happier employees, and happier employees typically are more productive. And so I could make a strong argument that energy management does this, and hopefully just through a quick little conversation here, you can see that as well. But don't disregard that as you're planning for the future. Another thing is better decision making. As you plan projects and as you operate your buildings, by having good utility data and doing good energy management, it really helps you to put your money, make your investments into things that are going to bring you the greatest value. And something I also throw into this conversation somewhat flippantly is it's hard to argue against improving efficiency, right? What would an argument be? What position could somebody take where they would say, you know what, I don't think it makes any sense to be more efficient. It would be a silly argument to make. And so if we all can get on the train, we can all get on board with this idea that being more efficient is a good thing. Now it's putting it into action. How can we make that happen in our organization in order to be more efficient? I'd like to transition into a conversation or discussion about the energy pyramid. So if you've seen some of my webinars in the past, this is something that I share in many, if not really all of my webinars, because I'm so passionate about it. I don't want to take credit for this, that it's my work. This is something that was given to us by Dr. Buffington from Penn State University. And this came out years ago, even decades ago, I believe at this point. But the concept is this, is if you really want to become as efficient as possible, you need to have a strategy, a long-term strategy that's built on these principles. And it starts with good energy information. In order for your pyramid to be foundationally strong, you need to build it on a strong foundation. And that's the energy information. And I think this translates into utility bills and more, which we'll talk about in a second. But after getting all of this good information, all this good data, you got to audit it. You got to understand what all of that data is telling you and begin to analyze it and use it for your benefit. The layer of the pyramid that has been my life for the last 20 years is this idea of energy conservation. And why it's in the middle of the pyramid is energy conservation for most organizations is a low cost commitment. It's the organization saying, you know what, we can expect more of our staff. We can ask people to do simple things to save energy. We can make different decisions. And so energy conservation can have a big impact and really not have a significant cost associated with it. And so energy conservation should happen before energy efficiency. And to clarify, energy efficiency is this idea of using or having equipment that's more efficient. So if you have lights that are 20 years old and replacing them with new LED lights, there's an efficiency gain there. That's what energy efficiency is. So it could happen with mechanical systems, like I say, with lighting. Building automations could give you more energy efficiency, weather stripping in the building, and a whole list of other things. But I would say energy efficiency should happen after energy conservation, because energy conservation is low cost. Energy efficiency is now you're going to have to spend some money in order to see energy efficiency. So let's do the stuff that's cheap and easy first, and then let's allocate our resources to spending some money getting things that are more efficient. And finally, at the top of the pyramid is this idea of renewable energy. And some people look at this and say, Tom, why would you put renewable energy at the top? It's so in vogue. So many people want to do it, renewable energy projects. Why won't you do that earlier in the process? And here's my argument for why it belongs on the top. Renewable energy needs to be at the top because you want to build projects. You might want to do solar projects or storage projects or wind projects, something that's renewable energy related, but you want to do them at the right size and scope. If you were to hypothetically slot this renewable energy into the pyramid below energy conservation, you would have to build projects you would have to make capital investments in projects that are much greater because the size of the project would have to be much bigger if you haven't done energy conservation and energy efficiency first. So by putting it at the top of the pyramid, you're sequencing it in for you to save the most money along the way, make the smartest decisions to protect your resources, and make the least amount of capital investment. And so that's why it belongs on top. So if your organization is newer to the commitment of energy management, don't get seduced into using your capital resources into doing renewable energy projects until you're ready. Teach others what I've hopefully begun to teach you here today in order to put it in the sequence so you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. So with that in mind, and this idea of the energy pyramid, let's back up a little bit and start to talk about more of energy management. Because if this is
And
the
hey, Tom,
approach, yeah,
sorry to interrupt, but we do have some good comments in the chat that I just wanted to chime in on for the slide in particular.
yeah,
So we had James said, if you don't address conservation and efficiency, you are powering your waste with renewables. Ha!
love it. Yes, that is
That's
awesome.
very
Well
well
stated.
said.
Yeah, that is terrific.
We're gonna have to snag that from you.
Yes.
And then the Devin said, which is ironic since as things age, maintenance costs increase, which was a comment to something that you had mentioned.
Yeah, yeah. Something else I didn't mention in my introduction of me early in the webinar, but I actually work for a performance contracting company as well. So I was part of the ESCO industry. So I very much believe in improving facilities and using performance contracting as an approach. I mean, I don't see any negatives to it. Again, a whole nother conversation for another day. But in terms of the energy efficiency piece, I think you need to use different strategies, performance contracting being one. Probably, you're using capital money from different budgets that you have. It might be bond money, depending upon who you are and how you operate. So I don't want to for a second diminish the possibility or the benefits of it. I'm just saying I think energy conservation just needs to be first and foremost. So yeah, that's good stuff. Thanks for weighing in, Danielle.
Yeah, and then one last one, just in case anyone's not reading the chat. Keith chimed in and said, I sat through years of watching energy projects go through when they knew the data wasn't right. After cleaning up and automating and testing, verifying our metering on campus, there was a lot of loss that couldn't be calculated from historical bad data as they were focused first on the project and what it saved, but not the fact that they couldn't prove it as the data was bad. Invest in data, metering, and systems to show what you did. We are big
Amen.
advocates of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. The other thing that I'd offer, and this is Tom's opinion about just what I've seen in 20 years in the industry, is that many times organizations don't have confidence in their people in order to better manage their systems. So they feel like if they spend money on a technical solution, something that has sensors and automation, it will overcome the training of the people and you'll get better energy management just because the system will be controlled by something that's technical. And I don't disagree that those things should be explored. But what I think is a mistake is assuming that technology can overcome all of this. You still need to involve the people, you still need to train them, you still need to get them actively engaged in the process because the best, most successful businesses and organizations I've worked with blended all this together, recognizing the limitations of their people and also the limitations of their budgets so that it all made sense as they move towards being more efficient. So all good stuff. Thank you for the comments. And thanks, Daniela, for jumping in. Transitioning into really the last part of the webinar, and it's focusing on this idea of the building blocks of energy efficiency. Every organization is different. Every organization has different opportunities to save. There's different politics. There's different dynamics within an organization. And so I recognize that up front. And what I want to share with you for the next 20 minutes or so is what I think needs to be part of your plan. And it's going to look different for you, as I've described, because you're unique, but it doesn't change in the sense that you need to make a plan. Your plan has to involve gathering information. You have to build strong relationships. You've got to learn your facilities and you got to take action. These 5 steps, I think, are critical, regardless of how it plays out in your world. This should always be the backbone of what you're striving towards and what you are trying to commit to your organization in order to bring them to where they need to be. So our next poll question here. I want to talk in a second a little bit about policy and guidelines. Before doing that, though, I wanted to find out, does your organization have an energy policy or energy guidelines, some type of document that might sit on the shelf, or maybe it's on a website, or maybe it gets communicated once a year. Just wanted to take the temperature of the audience today. Does this exist within your organization?
Looks like we've got a pretty even split across the board.
Yeah, that's what I'm seeing too, which is I would have guessed maybe more no's than anything, and it's actually the least, which is awesome. It means that that people have some type of document to start with, but it's good to know, and good stuff.
I will say there might be some people that might not want to admit they don't have an energy policy that didn't answer. Either way,
That,
you're in a good place
yeah, that could well be the case.
to learn. Yep.
Yeah. So with that as a backdrop, let me get into this first of the five items that I think are so important about making a plan. So one of the things that I think is just absolutely critical at the beginning of this process is you have to establish an energy committee. In my mind, an energy committee is a team of people, a relatively small team of people. I would try to keep the team no more than a dozen people, but it's got to be a team of people that's representative from the entire organization. So on the energy committee, you definitely have to have executive leadership. So if you've got a CEO or you have a superintendent or whatever that person's title might be, you've got a high level financial person, IT person, facilities person, you need to establish a team of people to come together in order to speak for the organization and put the organization on a path of what's reasonable for your organization to achieve in terms of energy management and a commitment to the environment in all the documents that will follow afterwards. This team of people, the number one step that I would say, and the number one reason for coming together initially, is to develop this energy policy. So the reason for the poll question a minute ago, is I wanted to get a feel for who's got them, and it was roughly 70% of the people on the webinar today have an energy policy. Some of you say, based on your answer, that it's pretty good, and others say it could be improved. But the thing that you need to really have is an energy policy as a backbone, is a place to start. And I also use the term here, energy guidelines. And I want to, for you, describe what I think is the difference between these two documents. An energy policy is simply a statement, a high-level statement from the Energy Committee that says our organization is committed to saving energy, and we expect everybody in our organization to play their part in order for us to be as efficient as possible. So it's more just an opportunity for an organization to win support and for us to say we're committed to doing this moving forward. To me, the energy guidelines are a much more complicated document and a much more controversial document. The guidelines represent how are you actually going to operate your facilities. Now, some people might put the guidelines within their policy, or some people might never create a series of guidelines, but I want to make a case for why I think the guidelines are so critical. If you don't have guidelines to establish the rules of engagement or the policies you're going to have in your building, your strategies for building control, you're really going to struggle to be as efficient as possible, because people simply won't know with what's expected of them. And the people making decisions for how to operate things, likewise, will simply just not know what to do in order to be as efficient as possible. So establishing energy guidelines means you got to talk about set points. It's one of the big things right out of the box that could be controversial, is you have to take a look at your organization, and whether you have 3 buildings or 300 buildings, and they might all be similar or they might all be different. You need to unpack the different types of facilities you have, but you need to talk about how are you going to operate them in terms of set points. Are you going to cool the building to 72 degrees? 74 is more efficient, but 74 is going to give you more complaints from the occupants of the building. Are you going to heat the building to 68 degrees or 70 degrees? You have to come together as an energy committee and begin to broach those questions and talk about how are you strategically going to manage your facilities. One of the things that I will lead off a meeting with, and when I meet with energy committees, is I will talk to people about occupancy as being the number one thing that needs to be understood and agreed upon for an organization to really have a high level energy management program. And it might seem so simple. Yeah, a building's occupied or it's not occupied. And I would say, boy, it's not that simple. Many of us are using buildings and we're operating and managing buildings that might be 100,000 square feet or 500,000 square feet. They're huge facilities. If you have 5 people in that huge facility, does it mean that it's occupied? What's going to happen next Thursday on Thanksgiving if you have this massive facility and there might be a few people in there working? Are you going to operate the whole thing? Are you going to heat it and cool it? You need to talk about what defines occupancy for your organization. I have always encouraged people to look at occupancy in terms of percent of what the building normally holds. So in a hypothetical situation, let's say you have a building that has a typical day to day has 100 people in it. I would describe it as occupied if more than 20 people are in the building. But if you have only 3 people in the building that are cleaning the building, I would not consider it occupied. And the ripple effect of that is that you would operate the systems differently if it's defined in an unoccupied state. Daniela, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say two things. One is Kevin made a great point. It is good to have an energy policy as long upper management is behind it. I know that was from a
Amen.
few slides ago, but definitely.
Yes.
And then Keith said it's even better if you have an energy department solely dedicated to it, which, yes, definitely the ideal situation. And then last but not least, on this topic of heating and cooling set points and all the fun things, Mike Hoffman posted here that 78 for cooling and 68 for heating is the range that ASHRAE 55 is ideal occupant temp range. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And all of that is great information. And what I would say is I agree with Mike that we as energy committees and leaders in the industry should always push our organizations to move to the boundaries of what is reasonable in their buildings and try to squeeze out some savings. And at the same time, I would say your energy management program can fail miserably fast if you've got a lot of unhappy people in the buildings because they don't find the temperatures reasonable. And so it's striking that balance. And it's back to this theme that you need representation from different areas of your organization to advocate for what's reasonable, and people need to listen. And creating these set points or agreeing on these set points can't be jammed down people's throat. It's got to be a discussion. And you might, in the short term, agree to set points that save less energy with the thought that a year from now, 2 years from now, you're going to move to set points that are more aggressive and will save more energy after people are on board. But it needs to be discussed. There has to be a good conversation in order for you ultimately to win the game and get to the point where you're as efficient as possible. So just kind of summarizing this slide and moving on to the next one. So get a committee of people together, take a look at a policy and guidelines, work through that. There are some great examples online. And if you want to reach out to me and you like to talk about this further, I'm happy to do that because this is a really critical piece of getting off to a good start. But make sure you're looking to the future and setting a multi-year plan here because what you agree to today might be something different for the future, but talk through that and get yourself a good strategy moving forward. I also had a question here. Would love for you to drop this into the chat, but where do your KPIs originate? Because I would say if the KPIs, if your key performance indicators for the success of an energy management program are given to you or created, let's say by the CEO, because he or she wants a certain reduction in emissions, and they don't have a very clear understanding of where you're at or what the data says, you are doomed to be unsuccessful. You need to create KPIs together as a committee with good data to set standards that are aggressive but attainable. I would never advocate for somebody that creates standards or expectations, KPIs that are just so far out there that they're just simply not attainable. I think it's much smarter to create standards and KPIs that are attainable. And it might take years of effort and a lot of time and commitment from the organization, but make sure that they're reasonable because people will see if they're not, and that you'll lose people's support if you create KPIs that are just too far out there. So please drop a couple of your KPIs in the chat, and Daniela, next time you jump in, maybe you can give us an update on what people said.
yeah, so Susie said that the KPIs are set by the federal government. So that's one.
Okay. Okay.
And then Joan said that the state's air pollution control division created our target GHG reductions. So not federal government, but still government.
Yeah.
And then if anyone else wants to chime in, we've got some other folks that have not responded yet.
Yeah. And what I would say to that is if you're working within an organization, a city, a state where there are the KPIs coming from some organization or from the federal government, like you're bound by that, that is great. I mean, I think you need to understand what those are But I think another important part is, what does your data say now about how attainable those goals are for the future? And so it's understanding the continuum from your current performance to what your future performance needs to be. And if that's the goal, then that's what you got to shoot for. But you just need to understand where you stand today. So the next part of the presentation, I mentioned that there are 5 different key components to moving towards better energy management. The first one was making a plan. And the second one is gathering information. So what I want to talk about here is just aggregating your data. And I'd mentioned in the energy pyramid this idea that you got to get your utility data all together. You got to centralize it and bring it together. So it's collecting all of your utility bills. If you're somebody on the call that's new to this and you say, well, Tom, how can I get all my bills, or how many bills should I get? I would say this: start to partner with your vendors, your utility providers. And usually most utility providers will give you 3 years of data. So they might give you a data dump, a data extract of 3 years of data, which is great data to have. And I think that 3-year window of time is an excellent place to start for you to understand your building historically. Have buildings energy use, has it changed? You can benchmark how one building is doing against the next, but it's about getting the data and beginning to centralize it. And my recommendation is to put in this some type of software. And again, kind of going back to the beginning, that's what we do at Energy Cap, is help our clients with that. But after getting all the data, you want to get out there and identify your meters in the buildings. You want to confirm meter numbers. You really have to get out in the field and audit your buildings and relate the physical facility bill with the physical meter that's in the field. You need to connect those. And if you've got more than a couple hundred meters, I'd almost guarantee there are going to be mistakes. And certainly if you have an organization of 500, 700, 1,000 meters, I can guarantee there's going to be some mistakes in the bills, because that's what we've seen through the years, both at Energy Cap and my experience in the industry. So you've got to understand the energy that you're paying for, how you're paying for it, and also where is that energy flowing into your building? Is it flowing into the east wing? Does it serve the entire building? You've just got to connect all those dots and understand better the whole meter infrastructure of your facilities. Another thing that I'd encourage you to collect early on is information about your buildings, such as square footage, mechanical systems, historical data, MEP documents, as-built documents. You might not use them initially. As you're climbing up the energy pyramid, this information might sit idle for a period of time, but it's probably also going to take you months to collect all this information. So begin that process. Start to establish that database, or an area where all of this comes together. Could be electronic files, or heck, it could be a file cabinet of just a whole bunch of documents so that you can have it in one spot. But eventually it's going to become really, really critical to have that information. So start in the beginning in order to get it. Another thing that I urge you to do if you're starting out is you got to track your building occupancy patterns. I'd mentioned earlier this idea of knowing who is where and when. Before you start to make changes to mechanical systems or actually implement change, you need to understand where the occupants are and what's needed. So get some anecdotal information, start to track some things. You might run some analysis of your building automation system for how schedules are run, but begin to build an understanding of that, because it'll help you in the long run. Some more themes of this idea of gathering information is it needs to be very transparent. Something I've coached and helped people with through the years is creating what I call site maps. Documents to understand better what's happening in the building, either with occupants, mechanical systems, with lighting, energy consuming equipment. You need to know what you got, and having something on a map or on a spreadsheet is really important because it helps with the transparency. Something I've challenged people with through the years is I tell them that if you can't understand the problem well enough to communicate it to somebody else, you're going to really struggle to get support in order to make change. By creating these site maps, these spreadsheets, these documents that understand the problem or articulate the problem, that shed light on the problem, those become tools that you can share with others in meetings and in emails, because you can win support to solve problems if people also share in the ability to understand the problem. So one of the challenges I see in energy management is because the world is so complex, there's so many variables involved, sometimes just communicating with your stakeholders, if they don't get it and they don't understand it, they're not going to support what you suggest. So take the time to gather the information, be transparent, create the documents you need, because ultimately you're going to act as a teacher at some point. You're going to be explaining these things to other people. You need to have good documentation to simplify the complexity of this world and so that they can give you the money or give you the support you need for moving forward. And finally, here it's just, consider where you store this information. Are spreadsheets the best way? Do you need some type of software in order to track your information? Do you need building automation systems or asset management tools? There's a lot of different products out there. So do your homework and start to invest in those systems because it's critical with keeping all of this data. So another poll. Wanted to find out from the audience, how familiar you are with your utility data. You've heard me over the last half hour, 40 minutes talk about the importance of the utility data. And I'd be curious how many of you are showing up on the webinar today and you're keenly aware of your data. Like you have a software program or you have spreadsheets and you just know exactly what's going on. Do you have some familiarity with it? If you wanted to get access, you could get access to it, but it really doesn't affect your day-to-day life. So you just don't pay much attention to it. Or are you one of those people that really never sees your utility data?
I would also be curious. The polls do come in anonymously, and I see a few people put in, I never see my utility data. Maybe that's dependent on your role at the company. So,
Yep.
we definitely have a lot of energy and facilities folks here on the call, but sometimes we have finance or other people. So if any of you guys did put the I can get access or I never see my utility data, would love to know maybe what department you work in or if it's just not as relevant to you or if you think it's not relevant to you. And that's why you're here to learn why you should be paying attention to these things.
Yeah.
Um,
Daniela, you just hit on an important point. Just that last thing you said is that I think even the CEO, somebody who is managing their organization, they should be aware of it as well. Because I think it just so when people have an understanding of how much money is being spent on utilities and where it's going and the inefficiencies, they're much more compelled and interested in making change. And so if you're not currently sharing that data, if you don't have a software program or a mechanism for dashboards or for people to see the data, I would also put that on your list and suggest that you consider doing that because it really does drive change when people can see the data.
and we did have somebody comment in here that they're sharing data via spreadsheets, but accuracy is a concern. So
Yeah.
yes, that's,
Yep.
you download things to your desktop, things are in the cloud, things are outdated. All of the fun things. And yes, James, awareness is key for sure. And I agree, Tom, like CEO, CFO, all of the things finance relate, like it's money spent and it's things that you need to know that are going on.
Yeah.
Quick question from Richard. Can you please explain the issue of accuracy since the bills are the bills? Have your utility upload data electronically, not paper mail. Human error. I think, Richard, maybe your question was more so for Stephen and Michelle, but Tom, you probably have some ideas of inaccuracies that come across when you are not using a dedicated system.
Yeah. What's very common, something that you might be unfamiliar with, is that utility companies make mistakes with regularity, where one of the things that happens is estimated bills that get trued up. And there's probably several people on the webinar today that have lived this, where there was an estimated bill that happened at one point, and then 6 months later, there's some type of true up, and they had to rebill you over the course of months of time. If you're not using a good system for tracking all that data, it can become a nightmare of just understanding what the costs are. And so having that utility data, checking it regularly and monitoring is just so critical in order to make sure that you're paying for what you're using it. And the utility company is only most utility companies, just a fact you might not know, are probably only obligated to give you an actual bill a couple times a year. Contractually, usually the contracts say that they've got to give you an actual bill 2, 3, 4 times a year. So by them sending you an estimated bill, even 3 months in a row, they're not breaking the contract, but you need to understand what those contracts are. And ultimately, if the data starts to run askew, you just need to be able to adjust to it and be able to understand it so that you can true it up and make sure that it's right.
Yeah. Definitely have some agreement on that with you in the chat, Tom. Um, we did have someone joke that no, utility companies are perfect. If any utility companies are on the call, we love you. You guys help us get our utilities, but everyone's flawed, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Just the world.
and
It's
then
just so so doggone many meters and so many buildings and stuff. It'd be impossible for it to be perfect.
It really is. And then Joan mentioned that there's also, the possibility of the electric company changes out a meter and misenters the multiplier. So there can be inaccuracies on both sides, right? There's all kinds of things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then just because we really do like commenting on stuff that's being said in the chat, Keith chimed in and said that he has two utilities that are asking for data on their failed meters because we have our meters next to theirs. If you create a good metering team and reputation, the utilities lean back on you as well. But yes, you have to proactively watch everyone billing you. Errors
Yeah.
galore.
Yeah. It's out there. All
So,
right. So we got about 10 minutes left. So let me just kind of jump through these last couple slides. So transitioning from this idea of we're talking metering and the data and bringing it all together and centralizing it. Another theme that I think is just really critical to this building a backbone of your energy efficiency and your energy management is just fostering strong relationships. So we mentioned earlier, we were talking about the energy policy, building an energy committee, but it's you got to break down the silos. You've got to get your executive leadership within these discussions, facility and operations, custodians, building staff, the facility occupants. If you're committed to energy conservation, it has to affect everybody in your organization. So build strong relationships. If you're on the webinar today and you are the person driving change, slow down enough to make sure that you're talking to everybody and win them over one person at a time. It's a huge commitment. It takes a long, long time, but it's the only way you're going to win the game. And it came out in the previous poll, but get to know your utility providers. So a comment there is just invite them into your office, get to know the people associated with your electric company, all of the resources that are available through rebates and incentives. All of that will pay dividends over time. But if you're beginning, this is where you want to start with the relationships, including your utility providers. So foster this energy conscious culture. Communicate consistently. You heard me say when I was talking about the energy pyramid, this idea of behavior change and culture, just so important. If you're currently of the opinion that people don't change, I would challenge that. What I would say, the third bullet, is that you have to recognize that behavior change takes time and it takes patience. And so people can change. People need to see the value of change, both in the day-to-day operations and also maybe the value to the company, but it also requires patience. And it requires doing pilots. Maybe you're asking somebody to manage their facility a little differently. Let me just take a random example. Let's just say it's a theater teacher. It's at some type of high school or some type of university where somebody's controlling the theater, the stage, and it's the lighting and it's the heating and cooling, and they have a certain way that they want to do stuff. They can be taught. Things can be explained. You can introduce them to more of the principles of HVAC and the benefits for controlling things in certain ways, but they're not going to likely do it overnight. They're just going to need time. So give the person the training, the attention they need, be patient with them, and they will change. Something that I would say too is highlight the benefit beyond just the energy savings. It's the comfort piece. It's, as I work with people all around the country, I've seen so many changes happen within the organization that started with energy management, but really became very significant changes within the organization. One of them being a client I was working with, it happened to be a school district, and we completely, the food services or the nutrition director completely changed how they ordered and operated their kitchens as a result of learning how inefficient their kitchens currently were and how they would operate in the summertime versus the school year. But they rethought entirely how they managed their nutrition program as a result of the energy program. And that's what I mean by good energy management. If you do good energy management, can have this ripple effect of the organization and improve areas you think would be completely disconnected. But in actuality, they are very, very connected. I mentioned this earlier on. I think Daniela teased me about this, but here's my comment about speeding up by slowing down. Don't try to do too much too fast. I've seen too many people in their enthusiasm to try to save their organization energy and money. They tried to do too much. People got uncomfortable. People got frustrated. There wasn't clear communication. My suggestion is there should always be a good tempo, a good expectation of change, but slow down a little bit and make sure that the things that you're doing happen successfully. You'll be able to build momentum and pick up the speed over time. But when you're just starting out, make sure that you take good, decisive steps, have a good plan in place. And by slowing down a little bit, you're actually speeding up in the long run. So this next slide here is about learning your facilities. And I want to go through this just about out of time. So I've got to rush here a little bit at the end, but make sure you take the time to learn your facilities. So get out in your facilities at different times, the occupied day, different times of the evening, in the morning, hopefully on holidays. You need to see your facilities at different times of the day in order to appreciate how they're operating. Is it heating? Is it cooling? Are the systems off? What about exhaust fans? Are there occupants? Get up on the roof, get in the basement, go to all the nooks and crannies. Make sure you're safe. But when you're ready, get the keys, get in the mechanical room so you can better understand the equipment that you got. Focus on the big stuff, the chillers, the pumps, the motors, things that consume an awful lot of energy, because that's where you want to start your effort, is managing those things in different. Biggest opportunity I see from organizations is running HVAC off schedule. So if you walk through a lot of buildings after hours when nobody's in the building, you'll hear things running. That represents the biggest opportunity for most organizations to get those things turned off, put a plan in place, a strategy. But you don't know that unless you get out in your facilities. And finally, this last idea is no savings happens, no good energy management happens unless you take action. So start with finding those billing areas. Start with that data, the energy pyramid again, that strong data foundation. Centralize your data, but then get out there and start to align the operation of the equipment with occupancy. Make sure systems are turning on and off at times that make sense. And if it's not, look for solutions to repair those things. Take action by looking at your set points. I'd mentioned the policy and the guidelines. Come up with your strategy. What are they going to be? And then start to consistently implement them and expect people to live within those boundaries. Take advantage of time to set back. Like even next week with the holidays coming, if you have a building or multiple buildings that you can turn off or set back for a period of time, take the action to do that, because there's significant savings that can happen as a result. Standardize those set points, and finally, conduct a soft commissioning of your BAS. And what I mean by that is, if your building automation system is loaded with different set points and different variables, you need to understand what those are and understand how your system is currently running, because likely there's opportunities to save. So begin to document that and understand that, and over time, just learn ways that you can improve those things. And with that in mind, I just want to give you a glimpse of something as we round out today's webinar. We have another webinar planned in a couple of weeks where I want to take the backbone of the stuff that I talked about today, and I want to translate that into the activities that I'd urge you to make over the next couple years of time. So we've got this template here, and it's crude, but the plan is to flesh this out in our next webinar, is to talk about these things. It's taking these strategies that I mentioned today and then talking about real world examples and what I would suggest that you do and how I would sequence it in order for you to see the biggest bang for your buck. So this is going to become the foundation for our next webinar. And that webinar is planned for December the 11th. It's at 1 p.m. And so if you are ready to take the next step, if you want to take some of these thoughts and ideas I had today, and you're looking for a little more direction, a little bit more specific, this next webinar is a place that you might appreciate. Again, today's conversation was more conceptual. This next one's going to be more literal. It's going to be more specific actions for you to take in your facilities.
And I'll leave this one up just to give people some time to respond. But in the meantime, we did have a question come in. I know we only have 2 minutes, but Mike Hoffman asked about your opinions with ISO 50001. I always forget how to say that. But what are your, let me read the question. I'm
Yeah.
losing the questions tab. Okay, what are your thoughts about the value of ISO 50001 as a basis of developing an energy policy strategy?
You know, it's an interesting question. I'm of the opinion there's a lot of different documents out there. There's a lot of different things that you could include in your energy management strategies. And I don't think it ever hurts to read and understand what's being proposed. And so I don't dismiss it or say no, but I'd say, you know what, learn from a lot of different sources and blend it into what you think is it's back to this idea of the policy and the guidelines. It has to be unique for your organization. And so take the information that's out there and turn it into something that's unique to your organization, because that's at the end of the day what's most important.
Cool. Well, we are right at the top of the hour. Mary, it looks like you raised your hand. I'm not sure if you did that on purpose. If you want to post in the chat your question. Let's see. Maybe it was an accident. Um, I'm gonna allow you to talk in case you want to say something. And yes, Richard, everyone needs a cost-saving company like Energy Cap. And that's why we exist. And actually, I don't know if you guys saw in the chat, but our founder, Steve Hines, was on the call behind the scenes. And so you can thank him for a solution like this. He's put a lot of work into it and started it back in the 80s. We've got a pretty cool history. Awesome. Well, I didn't hear from you, Mary. If you have questions, you can find us via email or Tom is on LinkedIn. But you all are wonderful for being here. Thank you, everyone in the chat, for your participation, and we hope to see you guys on the next webinar.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Appreciate your time.
Bye.